I want to welcome every one of you who came from far and near. This is truly a momentous occasion. I would say it's even historic on Kauai. I don't remember the last time that we had the privilege and honor of hearing a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor here on Kauai. This may be a first, and hopefully not the last time, but a good beginning. Before we begin, I just want to say some thank yous for all those that made that possible, this event. First and foremost, I want to thank Hashem, I want to thank our Creator for everything, for being here today, for us all being able to experience this. I want to thank Dr. Jacob Eisenbach for making the trek from California to here to be with us this evening. Thank you, Dr. Eisenbach. I want to thank a friend of mine, Rabbi Yisrael Han, who's a rabbi in Spokane, Washington, who had Dr. Eisenbach about a year and a half ago. And when I saw what an inspiring event it was, that's what inspired me to do this tonight. I want to thank the Marriott for working with us and making this possible, which was due to the generosity. So thank you to the general manager and to Deborah for your hospitality. Thank you, Andrew, for the audiovisual. Thank you, David, from KauaiVideoProductions.com for the video. Thank you, Valerie Thulson, for sponsoring a first-class round-trip ticket for Dr. Eisenbach from California. He deserves it. Thank you, David Steinman, for helping us with some of the costs of this program. I want to thank the editor-in-chief of the Garden Island, Bill Bewley, and his wife for giving us nice coverage in the Garden Island, and that definitely helped bring this crowd to here tonight. Thank you for that. I want to thank Dr. Josh and Chevron Corman of Los Angeles, who are also sponsors of tonight's event. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife, without whom all the logistics wouldn't have come into place as they have. So thank you, Zissa. I can't welcome everybody by name in person. We'd be here for much longer. And frankly, there's many people I don't know and hope to get to know, but we thank you one and all for coming. People from the Jewish community, people that are our friends in the wider community, thank you one and all. As you're all aware, the timing of this event was something that none of us could have foreseen. Everybody heard the news. Everybody woke up, whether it was last night or this morning, to the horrific news of what happened in Pittsburgh yesterday. And it shook us to our core that in free America, people praying in a place of worship should be gunned down just because of their identity. In this particular case, because they were Jewish. And when we planned this event months ago, it was the idea to give people on Kauai the opportunity to meet in person a Holocaust survivor. And people thought of it as, remembering what happened a long time ago and refreshing our memories, never to forget. And we were aware that it's not just an old memory that we have to remember, but that's, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is alive and well in many parts of the world. We didn't imagine that it would strike so close to the event and make it very real that we feel the ugliness, the evil, and the horrific repercussions of bigotry, intolerance, and in this case, anti-Semitism. So, we're going to start the evening, before I introduce Dr. Eisenbach, and we're going to remember not only the 6 million Jews that perished in the Holocaust, but also the 12 individuals, the 12 special souls who were massacred just yesterday in America just because they were Jewish. I'm going to call up 2 individuals in our community to light the candles. And it's not Shabbat candles or Hanukkah candles, there's no blessing, it's a memorial candle. We have 6 large candles, 1 for each of the 6 million. And then we have 12 smaller candles for the 12 souls who went up to heaven yesterday. At the end of the event, you'll have an opportunity to browse through this book. I'm going to put it at a table where you registered and came in. And hopefully, it's a big crowd. Maybe there'll be an opportunity for everybody to take a glance at it. I just found out about this book about 2 weeks ago. We had some tourists who came by our center and we were talking about this event, and they said, "You've got to see this book." And they told me about it, and I said, "Yes, I've got to get that book for tonight." And they said, we'll sponsor it. And it came, priority mail 2 days later. If you can please silence your cell phones, vibrate or shut them down, that would be helpful for the speech. Thank you. So, this book, it's a big, heavy book. There's 1 word in the whole book. It's made up of 3 letters. J-E-W. And the concept of this book is just, it's simple and it's mind-blowing. The concept is that the word Jew is written 6 million times. And as you page through this book, you'll see the font size that it took to fit that word in a book this thick, this heavy, and this large. And it gives you a sense of what 6 million is. It's a number. We just throw out the number. We realize it's a big number, but to actually visualize what that means is mind-blowing. And in the introduction, there's a 1-page introduction. It says, visualize each word as a human being, as a person, each line as a family, and each page as a community. And then you'll get a sense of what we're talking about. And this is hundreds and hundreds of pages. So as we light the candles, it's very minimal to light 6 candles, but it's the least we can do. And we're going to light the candles in tribute to these souls. And once the candles are lit, we'll have a moment of silence. And I'll make a memorial prayer for those that have perished. And then we'll have our guest speaker for tonight. So I'm going to call 2 women in our community. One, I'd like to call up Susan Storm, who's been a very integral part of our community, and very instrumental in our journey, to come up, and she'll represent the 12 Jews of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in lighting those candles. And I'm going to call up Ayala Weiss, who is a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and whose grandmother actually founded a Holocaust museum in Florida. And she's the president of the board of directors, or the founder, something like that. And she just came back from visiting her grandmother a few days ago, and has a very strong connection with her. And I'm just going to mention that I too am a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather, Shimon Goldman, who passed away just a couple of years ago at the age of 92, fled from his family at 12 years old. He ran away from his parents and family because they wouldn't listen to him when he said, it's getting dangerous, we've got to leave. So he fled town in the middle of the night through the forests with some friends and was the only survivor of his entire family. All his parents and brothers and sisters, uncles, aunts, everybody perished. He's the only survivor. By the time he was 92 years old, I think he had over 80 progeny, 80 children and grandchildren. And he wrote a book, etc. Tonight is not about him, but I remember living in his house for many years, and he would wake up with nightmares in the middle of the night, screaming sometimes. And it was, as a teenager, horrific to hear that because of his memories that would come to him in the middle of the night. So I know what it's I know what it's like to live with the Holocaust survivor. So I'm going to ask Ayala to light the 6 candles in memory of the 6 million, and they'll stay lit throughout our evening tonight. Thank you, Michaela. And I'll ask Susan to light the 12 candles. I'm going to read the traditional Kel Moli Rachamim. I'll read it in Hebrew and then in English, and then we'll have a moment of silence. El Moli Rachamim, Sheikhen Meremim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechoino Al Kanfi Hashchina, B'Ma'alos HaKadoshim HaTahirim K'Zoyra Rekia, Mazhirim Es Nishmais, Elu Sheholchu Lo'ilamam, Pa'avur She'yitnu Tzedakah Ba'at Haskaras Nishmasam, Gan Eden Tehei Menuchasam. L'chein Bal Harachamim Yasireyem V'Seiser Knafav Lo'ilamim V'Yitzrei B'Tzir HaChayim Es Nishmasam Adonai Hu Nachalo Asam V'Yanuchal Mishkavam B'Shalayim V'Neimar Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament, the souls of all those who perished in the Shoah, the Holocaust, as well as those who perished yesterday in Pittsburgh, who have gone to their supernal world. We will donate to charity on the remembrance of their souls. May their souls rest in peace in Gan Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter them with the cover of His wings forever, and bind their souls in the bond of life. The Lord is our heritage. May they rest in His resting place in peace, and let us say Amen. Dr. Jacob Eisenbach is a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor from Poland. He immigrated to the United States with his wife and firstborn child in 1950. He practiced dentistry for 60 years until his retirement in 2015, just 3 years ago. Today he will be speaking about his life in the grip of Hitler's Third Reich for 5 years, and how hatred, discrimination, and intolerance led directly to the Holocaust. He and his 96-year-old cousin in Australia are the only survivors of a loving family of over 100. torture, and mass murderers of numerous ethnic groups throughout thousands of years have scarred mankind's history. It has been and continues to be Dr. Eisenbach's mission to help eliminate the scourge of all genocides from the human race. Please welcome Dr. Jacob Eisenbach.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
I have another lei for you.
Okay.
That's the Hawaiian tradition. Okay. All you need to do is use these buttons, right?
Yeah.
These buttons.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Goldman, for the lovely introduction, for his hospitality. I was looking forward to being here for quite a while, and I'm so happy to see all of you here. I want to thank each and every one for coming here tonight. I'll be discussing issues of hate, discrimination, intolerance, anti-Semitism, and the problem of global importance, which is genocide. Genocides have been happening for thousands of years, not only against Jews, against all kinds of races, nationalities, and religions. And it's time for mankind to do something about it, and I'll be speaking about it a little later. As an eyewitness to the greatest crime against humanity in human history, I feel a moral obligation to speak about it, to keep telling people what actually happened, which should never be forgotten. Because if we allow this story to be forgotten, we would be contributing to a repetition. The famous philosopher, humanitarian, recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize and Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, I'm sure many of you heard about Elie Wiesel, said once that we should not allow the enemy to enjoy one more victory by allowing the crimes against humanity which they committed to be erased from human memory. For the sake of our children, grandchildren, and all future generations, that story has to be told and retold. There was a genocide of the Armenian people during World War I. 1.5 million Armenians were massacred. And when I was practicing dentistry, I had patients who lost their grandparents and other relatives in that massacre. Nobody ever talks about it anymore. And the presidents of Turkey to this day deny that this crime ever happened. And we have deniers who try to spread the idea that the Holocaust, which killed 6 million Jews, never happened. That makes it so much more important for me to do what I'm doing. I've given many speeches before I retired from dentistry, but since I retired from dentistry, I'm devoting my full time. I'm retired from dentistry, but I'm not retired. I'm very busy doing what I'm doing because I feel that this is of global importance. I was very lucky to have a wonderful childhood until I was 16 years old when World War I broke out. I grew up in a loving family. There were 4 children in my immediate family and my parents, and I had an extended family of about 100. And like the rabbi said, of those 100 people, there are only 2 of us that are still alive. That's myself and my cousin Henry in Melbourne, Australia. This is my mother. When I speak about my mother, I like to say that she was not human. She was an angel in a human body. Everybody who knew her adored her. She was kind, charitable. Every Friday night for Shabbat dinner, she invited a poor person to dinner. She died at the age of 41, 1 year before the war. So she never went through the Holocaust. She had rheumatic fever during childhood. It affected her heart valves, and in those days the medical profession had no solution for that problem. So she died at the age of 41. I was 15 at the time. There was a Jewish song called My Yiddish Mama, which translated means my Jewish mother. And one of the lines in that song says, in fashions she has no interest. Her jewels and her riches she saw in the smile on the face of a baby. Later on, when we grew up, she would gather her 4 children, put her arms around us, and blessed us by saying to us, "You are my greatest possession." She never knew what this blessing is going to do for us because she didn't go through the Holocaust. No matter what Hitler said and did to us, he couldn't possibly have destroyed the feelings that our parents built into us, that we are loved and our lives are important. The city of Lodz, my hometown in Poland, second largest city after Warsaw, was a textile manufacturing center. My father was a textile manufacturer, not on a big scale, but he did very well. Every summer, he would rent a house in a resort place. This is my family before the war. You You can see me in the middle standing. My younger brother Sam, 2 years younger, is on your right. My youngest brother Henry was 6 years younger, on your left. And my sister Fela was sitting between my parents. That was in the resort place. It was called the Mountain of Cherries. A farmer would come out with a long horse-drawn wagon. He would load up our belongings on that wagon, everything we needed for the entire summer. And we were sitting on top of that wagon, and we had a great time. It was only 10 miles from the city of Lodz to that resort place, but it took the horse a whole day to get there. Once we got there, we made new friends. We played soccer, basketball, bicycle, swimming. During the weekends, we would go to a nearby forest to pick fresh blueberries. My mother was a terrific cook, so there was no electricity in that resort place. We had electricity in Lodz, but not in that resort place. So we used kerosene lamps to light up our room in the evening. And we were reading books, meeting with friends, and having a lot of fun. I was a student in a high school when the war broke out. And my wonderful childhood has transformed into an unimaginable nightmare overnight on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler attacked Poland. 1 week before he started the war, he signed the non-aggression pact with Stalin, who was the president of the Soviet Union. So he decided to divide Poland and not to interfere with each other's activities. Within a week of the time they occupied my city without a shot, they started building a fence around the old part of the city. It was a barbed wire fence that was to be the future of the ghetto. Every 200 feet along that fence was a watchtower guarded by Nazi guards with machine guns and searchlights. They hermetically locked up the ghetto on May 1st, 1940, just a few months after they took over the city. And we were completely cut off from the rest of the world. We didn't know what was going on there. We didn't have any mail, newspapers, radio, no communication with the outside world. Before the ghetto was locked up, many Jews escaped from Lodz to the Russian-occupied part of Poland. Among those people who escaped was my sister Fela. "18 years old. She just finished high school, was admitted to the university to study pharmacology, but she never made it because of the war. She, with a few of her girlfriends, escaped to the Russian part of Poland and settled in the city of Lwów, L-W-O-W. 2 years after the war started, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact with Stalin against the advice of his top generals and politicians. They advised him not to do it because he will not be able to supply the front lines in the brutal Russian winters of 50, 60 below zero and 5, 6 feet of snow. But Hitler was under the influence of amphetamines. His judgment was impaired. He made one of the biggest mistakes that he has ever made by not listening to his generals. And he broke the non-aggression pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. That was the beginning of his downfall. He lost over 1 million Nazi soldiers on the Eastern Front. He lost many soldiers on the Western Front when the Allies landed in Normandy, and he was retreating from both fronts. So Hitler occupied the city of Lvov in 1941, 2 years after the war started. We didn't know what happened in the city of Lvov until after the war. I met a lady who managed to escape from the ghetto in Lvov, which was similar to the ghetto in Lodz. Barbed wire watchtowers and all that. There were 110,000 Jewish people in that ghetto in the city of Lvov. And one day the Nazis came with machine guns and massacred 110,000 Jews in the ghetto in 3 days. And I have never seen Fela again. On May 1st, 1940, they locked up the ghetto, and before they locked it up hermetically, they issued an order: any Jew found outside the ghetto after that date will be shot to death on the spot. So we moved into the ghetto, and the Nazis were in full control of our food supplies. And they gave us a starvation diet, just enough we don't die from starvation, but I saw many people dropping dead in the streets of the ghetto from starvation. In addition to starvation, we had an epidemic of typhus in the ghetto, a deadly disease. My youngest brother, Henry, was 11 years old at the time. He developed a high fever. We had our own Jewish doctors in the ghetto and 2 hospitals. So we called the doctor. He diagnosed him with typhus and told us to take him to the hospital. So we did. The next day, I was walking on my way to my job. I had a little job there. And I passed one of the 2 hospitals, not the one my brother was in. And what do I see? There was a big truck standing in front of the hospital. The kind of truck that was used to transport cattle with spaces between the boards. And they were loading patients out of that hospital. 30 layers of live people on top of each other, guarded by Nazis with machine guns. When I saw that, I started running to the other hospital where I took my brother to the day before. The streets were deserted. And I came across another truck like this, moving away from that other hospital, loaded with people to the top. The driver had a companion with a machine gun. I stopped to look between the boards to see if I can spot my brother. I didn't see him. And the driver's companion pulls out his machine guns and starts shooting at me. But I was in front of an apartment building, and I ran into the building, and his bullets did not catch me. So the truck continues in his direction away from the hospital, and I continued running toward the hospital. And I see a 3rd truck in front of the hospital being loaded. The hospital compound was surrounded by an 8-foot fence. So I ran to the back of the hospital. There was a big crowd. and nurses were handing patients over to that crowd over the 8-foot fence to save them from the Nazis. I jumped that fence. To this day, I can't figure out how I jumped the 8-foot fence. I'm 5'4". But I did. I woke up to the room where I put my brother in the day before, and he was not there. So I asked the nurses, where is Henry? He was taken away 15 minutes ago. He was in that truck that I met. So I have never seen Henry again because those patients were taken to Auschwitz and they were gassed the day they arrived. In the meantime, they were shipping people out of the ghetto by the thousands, by trainloads, 8,000, 10,000 at a time. And they were told that they are going to other camps for labor. But that was a big lie. We found out later on from the Polish train conductors that they're taking those people by the thousands and no one ever comes out of there. And they could smell burning flesh in the air. So we knew what the Nazis are doing. By that time, there were 3 of us left from my family. My father, my brother Sam, and myself. Everybody else was already gone. One day my dad received an order for deportation together with 600 men. After the war, I met a man from those 600. He managed to escape from that group, and he told me what the Nazis did with those people. They had them carry heavy rocks from place to place, useless work on a starvation diet, and they all died out. That leaves Sam and me. One day, I received an order for deportation. That was a death sentence. That meant the Auschwitz gas chambers. I did not report. I went into hiding. My brother Sam did not receive the order to report. He didn't have to go. We managed to hide for a month. We were hiding in friends' places. And before I got the order, we lived in an upstairs room with squeaking wooden steps leading to that room. 20 below zero outside and 20 below zero inside, no fuel. And neighbors were telling me that the police was there upstairs looking for me, but they saw a padlock on the door and they walked away. And they were there many times. So we decided, after we ran out of places to hide, to go back into that empty room. We put some straw in the corner. We lay down in that pile of straw. And one day in the middle of the night, we hear heavy footsteps on the stairs with loud voices. 2 policemen are coming up to look after me. One of the policemen says to the other, "There's a padlock on the door, there's nobody here, let's go." And the other policeman says, "No, let's not go." They found a crowbar, knocked off the padlock, and opened the door. And the first policeman had a flashlight, and he looks around the room, and he says to the other one, "Well, you see, the room is empty. There's nobody here, let's go." And the other policeman says, "No, let's not go, let's look at that pile of straw." And he finds us. That was the end. They packed us in cattle cars, 150 people per car, standing room only, not even enough room to turn around. 3 days and 3 nights. They unlocked the doors. Each car was guarded by Nazis with machine guns. They opened the doors, ordered us to get out. That was Auschwitz. That's what we thought. But before long, we found out that that was not Auschwitz. When the Nazis lost so many soldiers on the Eastern Front, they took out their own people, German people, out of the war production to replace the dead soldiers on the front. And they decided those young Jews who are still able to work, instead of gassing them, we'll put them to work. And they took us to a munition factory in Skarżysko, a city of about 70 miles from Lodz. Adjoining that factory was a concentration camp with 6,000 Jews. On the Nazi guards, they were marched in the morning to the factory and 12 hours later back to the camp. As the front was getting closer, we heard bullets and shrapnels and artillery shots in the air. The Nazis decided to move the factory from Skarżysko to the city of Częstochowa, closer to Germany. And we had to move those heavy machines that we were working on. I was working on a precision grinding machine, grinding bullets without filling them with explosives. That was for another department. We were moving those 2-3-ton machines on wooden rollers. One of my best friends, Nathan, fell under the machine and he broke a leg. And he was screaming in excruciating pain. And a Nazi soldier comes along and puts a bullet in his head. My blood was boiling. But my friend Nathan was dead. He wasn't about to help a sick Jew. So they take us to Częstochowa. The whole factory was moved to Częstochowa. And on January 15 to 16, in the middle of the night, the camp we were in was like surrounded by a barbed wire camp with watchtowers, machine guns, and all that. And all of a sudden, after 5 years, all the Nazi guards disappeared from the watchtowers with the machine guns. They got orders to run for their lives because the Russians are after them. Some people wanted to get out of the camp after they saw that the Nazi guards disappeared, but our Jewish leader of the camp advised us not to get out of the camp in the middle of the night. It's too dangerous. There's fighting in the streets. Wait till the morning, so we did. And the next morning, Sam and I walk out of the camp free. I met my future wife in the most romantic place you can imagine. A Nazi concentration camp in Skarżysko. She was already there when I came there. And she was from my hometown of Lodz. So the three of us walked out of the camp. First thing we were looking for was food. Our bodies were starved. So we find a Nazi truck loaded with food and vodka. We didn't drink. But we were told not to eat much food because our bodies are so starved that if we overdo it, we can get very sick. You have to build yourself body up slowly to absorb normal amounts of food. Sam and I walked out of the camp, We were both born and raised in Poland. We were Polish patriots. Except for anti-Semitism, we had a good life in Poland. I enrolled at the University of Łódź, and Sam joins the Polish army. Oh, let's see. That's me at the age of 22 after the war. This is Sam. After 2 years in the army, he reached a very high rank. He was a colonel at the age of 22 in command of a division of 10,000 soldiers, unheard of for a 22-year-old to reach that kind of a rank, one rank under a general. The army decided to send Sam to the city of Białystok, which was known to be a very anti-Semitic city. So before he goes to Białystok, he changes his name from Sam Eisenbach to Stanisław Adamowski, as Polish as you can get it, to hide his Jewish identity. But the anti-Semites discovered that Stanisław Adamowski was a Jew. And one day he comes home from his office, and an anti-Semite was waiting for him inside his house. And as soon as he came in, he put a bullet in his head and killed him 2 years after the Holocaust. After my speeches, I always have a question and answer period. And one of the questions people ask me, did I lose faith in humanity? So I tell them the story of the King of Denmark. I don't know how many of you heard the story of the King of Denmark. When the Nazis occupied Denmark, they ordered the Jewish citizens of Denmark to put on yellow stars on the outer clothing so they could identify them in the streets, round them up and send them to the gas chambers. And the King of Denmark said to Hitler, if that's what you are going to do to our Jewish citizens, I'm going to put on a yellow star. My entire family would put on yellow stars. And every Dane in the country would put on yellow stars, and you would not be able to tell who is Jewish and who is not. But then he was concerned that the Nazis may come up with other ideas of identifying Jews. So they shipped all their Jewish citizens on fishing boats to neutral Sweden, where Hitler couldn't reach them, and they all survived in Sweden. The dean of the dental school at the University of Iowa, David Jensen, is Danish, great humanitarian. His cousin was working in Denmark while Denmark was occupied by the Nazis. He was working with the Swedish government to obtain visas for the Jews. And all of the Danish Jews survived in Sweden. Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat, was appointed ambassador in Hungary. And when the Nazis occupied Hungary, they were about to ship 100,000 Hungarian Jews to the gas chambers. And Raoul Wallenberg issued them 100,000 Swedish visas. They became instantly Swedish citizens, and Hitler could not touch them. Albania, a small European country, 90% Muslim and 10% Christians, and thousands of Jews. When the Nazis occupied Albania, the people of Albania were hiding every single one of the Jewish neighbors in such a way that the Nazis couldn't find a single one. When I was practicing dentistry, I had patients, a couple, and their son is to this day an American ambassador to Albania, and he sent me a booklet entitled "Albania Saved 100% of the Jews." When Albania was occupied by the Nazis, Bulgaria did the same thing. In spite of the anti-Semitism in Poland, we have to be fair. There were many Polish great humanitarians who risked their lives by hiding Jews in holes on the ground. When the Nazis found out about it, they killed not only the Jews, but the Polish people as well. But they continued doing it. Mr. Mussolini, the leader of Italy, was allied with Hitler, but that didn't stop Hitler from occupying Italy. And when he did, he demanded from Mussolini that he turn over all the Italian Jews to him. And Mussolini said to Hitler, "We don't have any Jews here, we only have Italians." When you hear stories like that, how can I possibly lose faith in humanity when such great humanitarians were alive? And many of them risked their lives, and they saved hundreds of thousands of Jews. I was asked the question, did I lose faith in God? And some people did. My answer to that question was that when I studied the history and the culture of the Jewish people, the Jews were the only ones in human history who received the teachings of God. God descended and handed those teachings to Moses, our greatest prophet. I was asked the question, why did Hitler hate the Jews so much? So I did some research on that topic. And I found a book with Hitler's speeches. And this is what he said about his anti-Semitism. And I quote, "I was ordained to be the greatest liberator of mankind from ancient and outdated ideas of justice and morality. And those ideas were brought to the world by the Jews. When the Jews were dispersed by the Romans more than 2,000 years ago, they spread out to two-thirds of the world, teaching people the lessons that God gave us." So the Jews are in my way to become that greatest leader, and I have to eliminate the Jews. Anything else is immaterial. Those are Hitler's words. You all know what happened to Hitler, I assume. Shortly before the war ended, he committed suicide. He took a cyanide capsule and put a bullet in his head and had his assistants burn his body after they poured a lot of gasoline over it. He and his girlfriend, Eva Braun. The American writer Mark Twain once said, "The Jews had many persecutors and killers throughout history. They are all gone, but the Jews are still here." What is the secret of the survival of the Jews? There is no secret. The truth is, the reason we are still here is because of our indestructible faith in God. How can I possibly lose faith in God after studying our history and culture? I was asked the question, do I feel like having revenge? And my answer to that question was, our Jewish tradition is teaching us that one of the greatest achievements of a human being is to turn an enemy into a friend. It is much better than continuous fighting back and forth indefinitely. And what better example do we have than President Anwar Sadat of Egypt? How he overnight transformed himself from a deadly enemy into a friend. Why did he do that? The Israeli intelligence discovered that there's a plot to assassinate President Sadat. That was before he signed the peace treaty. And they knew the names and the addresses of the plotters. But they couldn't deliver that information to President Sadat because they were on a war footing. So they gave it to the King of Morocco, and the King of Morocco delivered it to President Sadat. He arrested the plotters, did with them what he needed to do, and it saved his life. And he was so thankful to the Israelis for saving his life that he decided he doesn't want to fight any more wars with them. He wants to make peace. After he signed the peace treaty, which was almost 40 years ago, my wife and I made a trip to Egypt. Right away, that peace treaty he signed is holding to this day. We spoke to many Egyptian people. Every single one told us, every single one of them, that they were supporting President Sadat in signing a peace treaty with Israel. And they don't want to fight any more wars. They don't want to lose their husbands, sons, relatives, and friends in wars. They want to live in peace. I gained a lot of respect for the Egyptian people. I was practicing dentistry for 18 years in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Until 45 years ago, we moved to California. There wasn't a single Muslim in Cedar Rapids in those days. I was there a year ago. The dean of the college, the dental college, invited me to speak. And I find out that there are 2,000 Muslims in Cedar Rapids. And the imam is a good friend with the president of the synagogue in Cedar Rapids. For 8 years. He was an Egyptian, and he is a modernized Egyptian. He doesn't believe in hate and hatred for the Jewish people. He invited me for breakfast. We had a 2-hour breakfast, and he and I became very, very good friends. So that brings me to the topic of genocides. Genocides have been happening for thousands of years. And they're still happening to this day in Egypt, Darfur, and other places. Madeleine Albright, the former American Secretary of State, and William Cohen, the former Secretary of Defense, co-authored a booklet. The title of the booklet is Preventing Genocides. You can get that booklet by calling the National Museum of the Holocaust in Washington, D.C. That booklet is very expensive, 39 cents. It's a guide for the American government and the American people, and for all of these international organizations which have been established for the purpose of preventing genocides and eventually eliminating them. And it can be done. It's a practical plan, a workable plan. The people who are likely to commit genocide are visible in a society. And the way to prevent them from committing genocide is by applying political pressure by influential, powerful politicians, by applying economic pressure, by applying military pressure if necessary. We don't want to lose a single life in the process, but just the presence of a powerful army will prevent a criminal from committing genocide. And here's another weapon against genocide. And it's operated by the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church has great warehouses, larger than the greatest department store, loaded with merchandise and goods and clothing. And free of charge, they issue all the help to a needy person without charge. And I asked them, do you have these warehouses in the United States, or do you have them elsewhere as well? And the answer is, we have them worldwide. They have bishops. You can call the Mormon Church in Salt Lake City, and they'll give you the telephone number of a bishop who is nearby, and he will have an interview with you. And if you need it, he will help you all we can, not only with the things you need, but with finding employment, educating, until you can stand on your own feet. Any one of you who is inclined to do so would do a great deed to make a contribution to that department of the Mormon Church. And it doesn't matter how large or how small the contribution is. It will make a great move. Genocides are partly caused by poverty, starvation, discrimination, and by helping needy people to stand on their own feet, that will be a big step toward preventing genocides. Someday, genocide will be prevented and eventually eliminated, and the people of the world will be able to say with confidence, never again. Thank you.
Questions now?
Pardon me?
We take questions now?
What?
Questions, yeah? Questions.
Yeah. Now we have a question and answer period, and I want to encourage everybody to ask whatever question you have. Don't hesitate, please. First question.
She's asking if you ever lost hope in the camps, and if you did lose hope at some point, what changed your mind to regain hope?
Very good question. Ever since I was 5 years old, I loved to sit in and listen to adult conversations. And I learned a lot of lessons. Our house always had company, relatives and friends. And I learned a lot. Many lessons that have helped me throughout my life. And if there is one lesson that stands out, that is, no matter how dark the clouds may be, there will always be a day when the sun will break through. Translated, it means you never lose hope for a better day, no matter how bad the situation you are in. And I was at the bottom of the pit at a point where I couldn't go any deeper. But I always remembered the blessing of my parents. Never to lose hope for a better day. And it helped me to survive.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Ja jestem też z Polski, z Łodzi.
Tak?
Tak.
Wow.
Bardzo miło Pana poznać i dziękuję za taką cudowną wypowiedź. Bardzo to doceniam. And I wanted to ask, have you ever visited Poland after the war?
After the war? Well, we just spoke in Polish. This is my first language. And this lady has relatives who came from the same hometown, is that right?
Yes, I am from Poland.
Yeah. And she is asking me if I was back in Poland since I left Poland in 1946. I did go back to Poland. I left Poland in 1946 after a pogrom in the city of Kielce, 70 miles from Lodz. A pogrom means an attack of enemies on the Jewish people. They were hiding a 10-year-old Christian boy and spread out the blood libel against the Jewish people, a vicious accusation that the Jews kidnapped the boy. And that's all those anti-Semites needed. They came out into the streets of the city of Kielce, and in one day they killed 39 of those few survivors of the Holocaust. And that was the day when my wife and I decided to leave Poland, which we did with difficulty. My brother had a high rank in the Polish army, so he didn't want to leave, he remained. But we left Poland, and about 25 years ago, my wife and I made a trip to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and we spent a week in Poland. Poland was under communist rule, so there was no private enterprise. Stores were locked up and boarded up. There was no merchandise. On day one, I exchanged some American money for Polish money, and after a week, we couldn't spend a dime because there was nothing available to buy. So we had to exchange the Polish money back to American money. One reason I went back to Poland is I wanted to go to my mother's grave. She died a year before the war, so I knew where she was buried, at the Jewish cemetery of Lodz. The other reason was Everybody lived in apartments. Only the ultra-rich lived in homes. And we lived in an apartment. We lived in an upstairs apartment in a nice building. And I wanted to see the place where I grew up. And the third thing I wanted to see is the school I attended. So we drove up to the building where I used to live in, and there I had two friends with me in the car. They were waiting for me downstairs. And I go up there, and the apartment was divided into 3 smaller apartments. 2 of them had padlocks on them, and 1 of them did not have a padlock. So I knock at the door, and a Polish man opens the door for me, and I said to him in Polish that I am here on a visit from the United States. I grew up in this apartment, and I came to see it. He opens the door wide, welcomes me in. His wife was cooking dinner for some company, and he had an 8-year-old girl. And he invited me to stay for dinner. And I said, I would love to stay for dinner, but I have 2 friends downstairs waiting for me, and I can't. So he made me promise to him that next time I come to Poland that I call him and be a guest in his house for dinner. I had a very good experience.
Dziękuję. Thank you.
There are many great Polish humanitarians.
Would you please share some of your words of wisdom regarding the events of yesterday that took place in Pittsburgh?
What happened in Pittsburgh? 12 people were massacred by a gunman. One of those people was a lady who was 97 years old, a Holocaust survivor. She survived the terrors of Nazi concentration camps just to be killed by a murderer in Pittsburgh. The world was shocked by what happened there. And I pray for the souls of the people who died. May they rest in peace. There are some people who were injured in that fight. 4 policemen, armed policemen, were injured in that fight, including many other people. I think it was a crime against humanity committed as a result of hatred. They used to say that the Jews killed Jesus. Pope Henry the 22nd in the 60s declared to the world, the Jews did not kill Jesus. The Romans killed Jesus. And the German Pope Benedict XVI, before he retired from the position of Pope, he declared to the entire world in his loud, influential voice that anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity. So the words of wisdom is to recognize what crime can do, what hatred can do. The Holocaust is a direct consequence of hatred, discrimination, and intolerance. I speak to many high schools, and I tell those students that some of you will be local leaders, some of you will be national leaders, and some of you may even become international leaders. And I have a message for you. Guard your precious minds, accepting ideas of hatred and discrimination. You can influence a lot of people not to accept ideas of hatred. And never lose hope for a better day. And one of...
You want to take more questions?
Pardon me?
More questions?
Yeah. And there's one question I was asked: what can we do to counteract anti-Semitism? Well, we should learn an example from the Mormon people. And we should follow one of the basic commandments. Treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated yourself. And that doesn't mean your neighbor next door only. It means your neighbor around the world. All of these problems we see, we have 8 billion people on this planet, and all of the problems we see are caused by a small percentage of the people. I always practiced dentistry in communities where the Jewish people were a minority, so most of my patients were not Jewish. California is made up of people from all over the world, from the Far East, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, South America, North America. And I dealt with those people. They are lovely people. They are good people. And they are all against hatred and discrimination. And I'm so happy that we have them here in this great United States. I was asked a question once. A man gets up and says to me that he and some of his friends believe that this country is going downhill, and some of his friends have moved away from the United States to other countries. What is my opinion? My answer was, the United States is the greatest country in the world to live in. Always has been. It still is the greatest country in the world to live in, and it's going to remain the greatest country in the world to live in. And he stands up and says to me, if that's your opinion, I'm not going anyplace, I'm staying right here.
She wants to know what the impact of the Holocaust was in your expressing or not expressing your faith.
Some people changed their names, some people...
Well, I tell you, the impact on me personally was that I have to do whatever I can to counteract hatred, prevent genocides, prevent discrimination, trust in mankind, and trust in God. We have on our currency and on our coins, we have the words, we trust in God. That's one of the greatest things that American people are doing, is trusting in God. Our rabbi in Orange County, California, said the other day, Israel was not created by the United Nations. Israel was not created by people. Israel was created by God. And we have to fight anti-Semitism by showing others what to believe. Treat your neighbor like you would like to be treated.
Thank you, thank you. I'll tell people if they have questions, they can come over to you.
Thank you very much for all your questions. Thank you again for coming and listening. Each and every one of us can contribute to the peace and to preventing genocides. And this is one of my missions in my life. It's preventing genocides. And
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacob Eisenbach. We're very honored to have you visit our community and share your experience.
thank you.